let's recollect. In the name of the Father and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, that you are always near. Apart from you, we can do nothing. With you, we can do all things. Let your will be this continued conversation, this continued weekend of healing. Amen. I want to start with some questions and answers, if there are any. And I'll start with my question, and that is, how is it going so far? How you guys went, I invited everyone to go into a much harder period or box of work, the shame box, mom and dad stuff. We got the tools in place and practiced on easy stuff. We got some principles in place, some terms in place, and we went into a heavier, deeper spot today. And this can go for any bit of the work you're doing, but how's it going so far? How has this experience been? What questions is it raising? Is it working? Is it not working, etc.? What you got? What? It's working. Okay. How so? No details, please. But okay. So thank you. So you're keeping your list and you're watching those numbers drop. Anybody else keeping their list and watching at least the tools are working, numbers are dropping? Okay, fantastic. So that's either the full scraping of barnacles when they go from like sevens to zeros, like we heard this morning, this barnacle's gone. Or we're working on it, we're chiseling it, we're making progress, we're getting some of those sharper edges off of it, but we're still trying to get to the root of it. Okay. Did anybody see a categoric difference when they went to mom or dad or shame? Was that similar, still making progress, numbers are going down, or did anything change with that? Anybody have a thought there? So the rumination began, and did it feel like um, a feeling on the hamster wheel, or did it feel like something like accusing out of the back seat? We've thought this before. So that follows into, so it's hopeless. What's the point? This is a waste of time. Okay. Okay. Um, Thank you for sharing. So, how many people in this room do struggle with rumination? A feeling getting the imagination is just running and running there. Okay. And it can be anxious. It can be, the big three would be angry rumination, having fights with people who aren't there. I was awesome at that. Um, Beating up bullies from 20 years ago. Um, Anxious rumination has a lot of variations. It could be obsessions. I think we all got our anxious rumination on during the pandemic, because we didn't know what was happening and we weren't told well what was happening. And so we all became a bit fearful. All my OCD clients were like, I feel so validated right now that the whole world has joined where I live every day. Um, but there's other types of anxious rumination. There's phobic rumination. There's OCD rumination. There is catastrophizing rumination. So there's different dialects even within these. And then there's depressive rumination, which can be like the pity party and the woe is me and there's no hope and dot, dot, dot. But any capital sin could be put into rumination because they all go after our passions. Any passion can get stuck in our imagination and run there. Seeing that a lot of the room's hands went up, would you guys like to learn just a couple simple tools to guard against rumination? Okay. Big caveat, if it's a part, you want to quiet down the part by with the shh, the be aware, beware, understand, and take action to reject. So you want to say to the part that's triggering, um, let's say it's my people pleaser trying to trigger up because it's anxious about what you guys think about me, which is not actually true, but it's a good for instance. And it was trying to do that this morning. So I would just simply say, hey, shh, thank you for trying to help me. I'll take care of the retreat. You don't have to worry about these guys at all. I got them. It's my grace estate. I need you to buckle up. That, incidentally, is a tool called thought stopping. This be aware, understand, and take action is called thought stopping. I'll present 3 quick tools to you based on St. Paul's Philippians 4, 6 through 8. Okay? And Philippians 4, 6b begins, do not be anxious about anything. Okay? And the moment you notice the hamster wheel going, the rumination is beginning, the rational brain is built to have the authority to tell the emotional brain to knock it off. Okay? It may take some practice to get the muscles. I ruminated on beating up bullies and having fights in my head for 20 years before I knew it was a problem. I was 27 doing anger management work, and for the first time in my life discovered that violently beating up bullies in my head was a problem. That's how I put myself to bed every night. That was my bedtime story. Violence, vengeance. Did a wonder on my psyche, to say the least. So it took me a couple months of using tools like this to break the habit of rumination. I hardly ever ruminate at all. It takes a lot to trigger me into rumination, and it almost always involves a part if it does trigger strongly enough. So thought stopping can be the gentle shh, thank you, but no thank you. It could also just be you with some authority saying, stop it. Okay, that's the one I use. Ian, stop it. Okay, and since I had an authoritarian dad, my cortex taking authority over my limbic system, my rational brain asserting authority over my emotional brain stops. My dad trained it. So if a parental voice says stop it, my head actually stops it. And I get a pause, and the hamster stops on the hamster wheel. Okay. And then I can change my thinking if I need to. A lot of times I can catch it quickly and say stop it, and it's done. It's not a big fight. It's not violent. It's just stop it. Okay. The second tool is called thought pulling, because St. Paul's not finished. He says, do not be anxious about anything. Stop it, or shh, thanks but no thanks. But in everything, in prayer and petition and thanksgiving, present your request to God. That's an exchange about to take place. And this part is the first part of the exchange. Don't be anxious, present it to God. So thought pulling would be take whatever's bugging you out of your head and put it in the Sacred Heart of Jesus. So on the left-hand side of the chapel, you can practice this in Holy Hour tonight. Jesus is up there giving his benediction, and he's gesturing with his left hand to his Sacred Heart. Boom, that's where you're going to put the stuff you don't want in your head, right into the Sacred Heart and the Divine Mercy image of Jesus. Okay? Do not be anxious, present it to God, and now we see the exchange. And the peace of God that transcends understanding will guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. So now you can imagine those rays coming out. I've just placed what I'm burdened with. Come to me, you who are weary and burdened, I will give you rest. I'm going to place my burden into the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and then I'm going to allow the rays of Jesus to penetrate where I was burdened. Now, for those of you that are kinesthetic or just like abdominal breathing, and it's good in its own right, a beautiful way to do this is to take a big cleansing breath and then release the burden in your imagination, in prayer, in faith, right into the heart of Jesus. On your slow exhale, imagine that person, that memory, that burden, that struggle, that thorn in your side, going right into the heart of Jesus. And then a very slow, deep inhale, 5 seconds, 1,000, 2, 1,000, if you want to time it. Imagine the peace of God that transcends understanding coming into you. Okay? Or one ray coming up to guard your heart and one ray to guard your mind. Okay? I usually do this exercise in the vicinity of a Divine Mercy image, but I can just close my eyes and imagine it too. It's a very powerful tool. I have seen miracles happen with this tool. Jesus takes his half of the exchange seriously. We see it in 3 places in Scripture that I know of. Come to me, you who are weary and burdened, I'll give you rest. Don't be anxious, present it to God, and the peace of God that transcends understanding will guard your heart and mind, your limbic system, your cortex, if you will. And the third place I've seen it, cast your burdens upon the Lord and he will sustain you. So in the Psalms, we see this exchange again. There's probably more I'm not thinking of, but I'm confident there's more. So this exchange, if we will do our part, God will do his part. St. Paul's not done. There's a third tool called thought switching that I call thought switching. I made up all these names. You can call it what you want. St. Paul's not finished. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is good, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is worthy, anything of excellence, anything noble, think about these things. I kind of butchered that, but he's the king of run-ons, and he's hard to track down sometimes. So when I progress through these tools, if I can say stop it and it's done, a quarter second later, I'm done. That's all the effort it took. Okay. And that is actually mostly what I need to do. But if something gets a little deeper in there and it's bugging me, I'll flick it away. If it doesn't flick away, I'm going to put it in the heart of Jesus. If it doesn't go immediately into the heart of Jesus and depart me, then I'm going to start being like, okay, let's get serious here. I thought this was fleeting and it's not. Now I'm going to take my abdominal breath. And I might do that 3 times. Okay. The abdominal breathing is beautiful for physical agitation coming out of anger or anxiety. Incidentally, it quiets the body. It increases oxygen flow to the brain, lowers the pulse, it lowers the heart rate. On its own, it'll calm people down, let alone combined with a prayer and faith in God and God's grace coming into us. Okay, so if I still find after all of that, the thought stopping and now the deeper levels of thought pulling, still being bothered by something, that's where I'm going to shift to thought switching. I'll have a go-to thought ready to put in my head. The place I use this the most, this is going to seem silly, but the place I use this with the most is with music. I have a musical brain, and if I get an annoying ditty in my head, it will play there and play there and play there and play there and torment me. I had the Armour Hot Dog song in my head for 3 days one summer, and I can't even tell you what the Baby Shark ditty did to me a few years ago. It was torment. It was brutal. And so what I'm going to do is the ditty's going to come in. I hear somebody saying something. I catch a snippet in the store, and it's you ever listen to a song in a store and you're like, oh, I know this, and you start singing it like you haven't sung it in 20 years, and then you're secretly horrified at the words you're singing, like, oh my gosh, I never realized what this song was saying. Now this song is in my head and I'm singing this awful thing. Or sometimes it's an awful modern song and it's super catchy, like the music part of it's really good, but the message is horrible. I have that happen too. So anyway, what I'll do is flick the song away. Maybe I'm done, maybe I'm not. If it doesn't work there, I might do a deeper breathing. If it's still stubborn, what I'm going to do then is replace the song. I'm still going to give it to Jesus, but then I'm going to immediately play something that's good, true, noble, worthy, and excellent. I'm going to play Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring in my head. I'm going to play For Elise, something secular but classical and beautiful. I'm going to play Ode to Joy. I'm going to put a praise and worship song in my head. And I'm going to, a catchy, good praise and worship song instead. And I'm going to replace what was stinking thinking with something that's good, true, noble, worthy, and excellent. Okay, that's the most common place because my musical brain is sticky. The first tools don't always work as well. My head often is singing something. Okay, does that make sense? This is another, yeah, please. Philippians 4, 6 through 8. And just as a side note, anybody who wants any of these resources, I have worksheets and even some talks on almost any of these things we've talked about. So if you want to go deeper or want a worksheet, you can just email me. I don't know if you have access to my email, but I'm happy to give it to you. So I'll just give it to you. It's the letter I, Butler, B-U-T-L-E-R, I Butler, so my first initial last name. And I have to apologize at this point because it gets really long. I tried to shorten it, but my nemesis took my own email name. I'll explain that in a second. So iButler at holyfamilycounseling.org. iButler at holy, Holy, family, counseling, counseling.com. Org, thank you. .org. It's Holy Family Counseling is short for Holy Family Counseling Services. I tried to get my email name to be ibutler@hfcs.org. And no joke, high fructose corn syrup beat me out. My nemesis. So, but you can email me for resources and talks and things like that. Yes, please. Toss that right out. Yeah. Doubt, shame, guilt, anything else, anything the enemy of the world, flesh, devil will come and try to snatch these seeds away. The proof is in the pudding. The healing either happened or didn't. That zero is either a zero or it's not. Um, um, if any distress comes in with a statement coming over our shoulder like that from one of our parts or from the enemy himself, it's going to be a different feeling. It's going to be the feeling of doubt. It's going to be the feeling, I'd say doubt for that statement. So I would just chuck that thought. And if you want to test whether healing happened, just poke it. Bring the memory up deliberately, play it through, and see what it says after dismissing the distracting, unhelpful thought. Healing is just healing. You're not going to undo it with some doubt at all. So, but there could be a doubt. There could be a doubting part, like scrupulosity loves to doubt. But it could just be the enemy, capital E enemy. Anybody else have an experience with shame that's going maybe well? Like, oh, like my personal journey into the shame box was really, really good. Because as I began scraping those barnacles, that was the heaviest weights I carried and therefore the most liberating to jettison. I felt so much more buoyant, so much more free. And so unlike some of the other healing I did, like, I got to do dad work again, where I'd get irritated at God, as we cycled back around for another round of healing, I climbed the mountain of health. Yeah, once I started realizing, oh my gosh, I can be free of this shame. I want it gone. I don't want any of this cancer in me at all. So that's what I'm hoping somebody will experience, not necessarily right now today, but as you work. Any, please. Not, not. I got the first part. How do you tell if it's a wound or I didn't catch the second part? Well, a perceived wound is a wound, regardless of how you perceive their behavior. So if it hurt, we should honor the hurt. Okay. So even if they didn't intend it, even if it was accidental, it hurts. And so I can do forgiveness work, or I can do the steps if I think I need even deeper forgiveness and healing steps. I can double down. I don't know if I'm answering your question. So those are the steps. Oh, question? Did you bring God into it? Did God show up there too? Okay. And so those loving persons coming into the memory, because they're present to it. Everybody you dinged off is an eternal being. This bakes my noodle to think too much about it, but God and the Holy Spirit and your guardian angel are present to that wound when it happened. You're going through time, but there is a piece of you stuck at that wound, and God's still present at that wounding too. He's as present to that wound as to the day of your birth, to the day of your death, to all of us in the kingdom of heaven at the wedding of the Lamb, to the Last Supper table, to the cross. Like God is present to all of this. Salvationist history is all right in front of him while we sequence frame by frame. So healing work is tremendously profound because God is still present in the place we're injured. He's still grieving it. He's still there pouring out grace into it. Very profound. And so when we step out of time into eternity, something mystical happened in that moment there. That was a powerful thing, and that's sacred ground, and that's just a beautiful gift and a mercy pouring out because God wanted you free. So thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. It's not common. Um, that was a gift. Sometimes God wants us to fight more in these memories because it grows us stronger. He wants us to learn to fight for ourselves. But he just gave you a free gift of grace there. That's amazing. Great. Hmm. Question. Hmm. Great question. So how do we pace this? Um, and what I'll recommend at the end, I recommended it already, would be try to do one memory a day for no more than 5 minutes. Integration is different. I'm going to go deeper into integration based on all the shows of hands and the discussion points. I want to spend some more time there today. But if it was just a memory, I would do 5 minutes. And if it wasn't finished in 5 minutes, I'd be done in 5 minutes. And I'd come back to that same memory the next day, having slept on it, having dreamt on it, having prayed a bit more into it, and I'd spend 5 more minutes. If a memory remains stubborn after 2 to 3 repetitions, then I would consult somebody else. Something's going on. And maybe talk to a friend, a pastor, a skilled healing buddy, whatever. Um, if the memory dies down to 3, 2, 1, next memory, next memory, next memory. Yes. So there's the desire to just sweep the whole thing clean. There's some good and bad news to that. The good news is when we're doing a box, and once we figure out the sequence of where the wound is, where the lie is, where the future good news is, it's just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And we do get faster and faster. And because everything in the box bumps into each other, if I've got 10 wounds in a box and I heal the worst one or the first one, everything else in that box just got better by the nature that I took care of a bad one or the one that was feeding into the rest. If you got a lot of stuff and you're not sure where do I start, first or worst are bang for your buck. What's the worst thing I can think of? What's the first thing I can think of? Those are a great place to start, either one. Okay, now I have 9 things in the box and all those numbers just went down spontaneously because I took care of the worst or the first. By the time most people get to like memory number 5, we can sometimes just skip straight to forgive, 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 forgive for the home stretch. Like we just don't need, the heart and the mind have figured out what the lie is. They're going around unlocking things. I rely upon this. It's called the generalization effect. I rely upon this when I do trauma work and when I work with people who have really messy histories. Um, that at some point, like dominoes falling, a box just takes care of the rest of itself. So I very often see this happen after 3, 4 memories. The bigger, more memorable, vivid ones are taken care of. And then all of a sudden, everything else just starts diminishing. So you could strategize that and say, well, I don't want to do one memory a day, but I think for a half an hour on a Saturday, I'm just going to do a healing morning and I'm going to do that deep clean. And you do that. When I do this work with the propedeutic seminarians, I think they've got the best deal of all. You're getting a lot of information over the course of a sequence of hours. The lion's share is just today. You got a little bit of intro yesterday. You'll get a little bit of outro tomorrow. The lion's share is 3 big hour-long talks today. When I do formation for the CFRs, it's 2 2-hour talks twice a day for 3 days straight with all this stuff and more. And it's violent. It's too much. I feel terrible, but that's how they signed me up. So I just turn on the fire hose and I blast them. And I hope that they have the wisdom and the prayer life and the direction to know which part to take and work with. This is a lot. This is a lot of stuff we're talking about here. And I wasn't even intending on talking on some of this. But I keep steering it for what I'm hearing and seeing and the discussions and the questions. So the propedeutic guys, they get 2 hours once a month. Introduce it, and then, so it's more like a seminar. That's the best sequence I've ever seen. And I trust them to do memory work or integration work as they go. So it just depends. This is tough, though. This is a lot. And if you have the energy and stamina to do a deep clean like that and just go for it, go for it. And take a nap, schedule the nap after that. If you'd find it tiring, most people would. And then go on with your day. And I wouldn't do that on a day where you've got a lot of social functions and a lot of gatherings and a lot of duties. I would pick a very chill day to do something like that with. Okay. Really good questions. Let's go. Oh, yes, please. What if there's no person to forgive, like a natural evil, a natural disaster? Yeah, I will often have people actually do forgiveness to their own bodies. Have you thought about forgiving your body for whatever the condition is? Because we can resent our bodies. I believe every person has some deficit across every quadrant. Everybody's got something going on physically. Everybody's got something going on emotionally. Everybody's got something going on intellectually, a weakness, I mean, and everybody's got some kind of deficit spiritually. Um, and so, but some people's physical deficits are a lot worse. They've got diseases or crippling things or birth defects, or like some people just come into life behind the 8 ball big time physically. Some people get degenerative things on the physical side. But I have seen people really respond well to, I forgave my body for this ailment and I feel better. I have people forgive God. Now, that's heretical on one level because he can't morally do anything wrong, but a perceived wound is still a wound. And so if we're mad at God, let's address it. I just say, tell him you're mad and walk through the steps, and it immediately becomes a prayer. And there's a lot of crotchety saints and a lot of crotchety scriptures where people just blasted God, and we should do the same. He's a big God. He can handle it, and it's a prayer. What's worse is to be mad at God and then give him the cold shoulder and not pray for 2 months. That's way worse. Tell him if you're upset and even forgive him. Certainly, I would invite you to forgive yourself for stuff. That's what the shame box needs. And I debate with colleagues on, well, is that a proper thing? Is that possible? And I come back again to the perceived, my personal take is respectfully disagreeing with too much head traffic or too much smarty pants thinking, is a perceived wound is a wound and we should treat it as a wound. And it will start responding and healing very typically. I've never run into an issue on any one of these things. Nobody was struck dead with a lightning bolt. Nobody, nobody got stuck. Um, so. And so can we forgive nature? Yep. Most people, though, when there's a natural thing, are going to get into the problem of theodicy, which is the theological dilemma of how can an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good God have allowed this tornado to strike my house? And that's that problem of theodicy, problem of evil in this world, every person's going to contend with at some point. Evil is going to come to your doorstep at some point, and you're going to wrestle with the nature of God and did he love me? Um, my son got around to that at the age of 3, sitting on the toilet, constipated, bemoaning how God could let this happen to him. So I was discussing the problem of theodicy with a 3-year-old on the toilet. I thought, here we go. Okay, here we go. And he went straight to the love of God. And I'm a little surprised at that. But natural disaster, disease, tragedy, criminals, it's, yeah. So yes, we can forgive on any of these dimensions. Yes, please. Theodicy. We're not forgiving anybody necessarily when we dig into the question of evil and God. If it's, I usually come around to forgiving Adam and Eve and recognizing that I'd be no better if I was Adam. Okay, natural evil came into the world because the stewards of creation fell, and creation fell right with them. My backyard is a great example of this. Okay, it is a garden where I grow weeds, and I try to kill them sometimes, and I try to. Now I'm just grateful they're green, and I don't have to mow as much. But the steward of my backyard shows my gardening ability. When Adam and Eve fell, creation fell with them, and requiring a new Adam, a new Eve, a new heaven, and a new earth. And so everything's going to be recreated. Then we'll have our glorified bodies without our glasses and without our defects and with perfect memories and all that other stuff. And a new heaven and a new earth. So natural evil can be forgiven by tracking it back to original sin. That's one way to do it. And the question of theodicy ultimately rests in the problem of free will. God's nature to love necessitates we have the freedom to choose him or not choose. So that's where I end up going. If you want to talk more about that, talk to Father. That's more his cup of tea, or we can talk later. Okay, really good questions. That's a deep one. I have no idea what I told a 3-year-old, by the way. Okay, let's spend a little bit of time on disintegration. Woe to you of two minds. St. James, or the prophet Isaiah, he has sent me to heal the brokenhearted. Oh, to bind up the brokenhearted. Brokenheartedness, according to some authors, is the Old Testament way of describing this fracturing of original sin, where we're of two minds, we're beside ourselves. That's a modern cultural slang for having an ego state or a part triggering. Woe to you of two minds. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Another St. James, I think. Same passage, actually. So how do we bind up the brokenhearted? I want to give you a tool for this. If you've started to figure out, oh, I think I have a guilty script, or I have a perfectionistic script, or a conflict avoiding script. In fact, let me just go through a few scripts. I think I have them here. Yeah. If you have an obsessor or a compulsor, if you have comfort food eating that can take you over, if you have a globally critical script, if you have prejudices, if you have perfectionism, these are all types of things that can ride in the backseat of the car or even be our main persona, like me as the people pleaser perfectionist for 17 years. These can be in the front seat driving us. I have a list of like 150 of these. I just gave like 5 to you guys. But like 10 of them are perfectionism variations and 10 of them are anxious variations. And then there's a lot of standalones. In IFS, they categorize them. There's rescuer parts and there's abusive parts and there's, I don't know, there's firefighting parts. They break out categories in that. And I'll give a title as I wrap up tomorrow with some of the resources. If this lights you up or geeks you out, I'll give you some resources for our next step as we close. But I just want to give you some idea of the types of things lots of people carry around. and what to do about it. So let's say you've got a part. Now, all of these parts or defenses are not created equal. A pet peeve, in fact, let me ask this as a question to you. Can somebody tell me what a kitchen table peeve was in your family of origin? What were the rules? What was a rule? No elbows on the table. What else? You with your mouth closed. What else? No hats. No singing? No singing at the table. That would have been hard for me. We hit the biggies there. Oh, no, wait. Finish your plate. Anybody got that one? Yeah, and the older a person is, the more generational that was, because 4 generations ago, America knew starvation. And the whole culture can pick up a script at the same time. European culture only 3 generations ago, because they knew starvation after World War II, where we haven't really seen starvation since the Dust Bowl Great Depression in America. So whole cultures can pick up these trends and finish your plate. There's whole Mediterranean cultures around. If you don't eat the food presented, you're rejecting the love of the person that made it. Okay, Greeks, Italians are big on this one. Food is love, in other words. There's a lot of cultures that can do that. And I'm being stereotypical deliberately. There's obviously exceptions. What about frugality peeves? Frugality peeves. We talked about the fridge door. We talked about the front door. But there's a lot of others around money that are really interesting early. Yes. Yeah, my dad was big on that one. This is a funny story, true story. On my wedding day, my father-in-law confided in me. He took me aside. He's like, Ian, I just need you to know I never got her to turn lights off. I noticed that he waited till after the vows were exchanged to tell me this, because this had ramifications on the validity of the marriage. No, I'm teasing. But I thought this was hysterical. He revealed to me who had the peeve, right? He was. The worst dad I've heard of with the light switches was the dad who would turn the lights off in rooms people were using. That's my favorite example. People are in the room and he'd still walk by and turn lights off. Like, you don't need that much light. And I do walk around my house turning off, I would say on the average of 10 to 20 lights a day. I don't get mad about it. It's not actually a peeve because my dad didn't get mad about it. But I do think thrifty, this is a waste. Nobody's in this room. I'm forever turning the basement lights off. It's interesting, but it's not my hill to die on. So it's not a biggie for me. Other frugality, can't buy something if it's not on sale. Anybody had that? Needed a coupon or on sale, okay? Or it's not being bought. Or somebody said to me very recently, it had to be on the discount menu or something like that if it was eating out. Now, my family just didn't eat out. That was a total waste of money. So that they got to go get something off the dollar menu was like, that's extravagant to my wiring. Wow. McDonald's never. And we can toss in driving peeves. Okay, how many of you guys have driving peeves? Something that really irritates you when you're on the road. What irritates you on the road? Yes. Okay. What else? Driving peeves. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Somebody who just keeps adjusting. Yep. What else? Yes. And Nebraskans are terrible at that. I'm a New Yorker, so we don't even call it zippering. We just call it cramming in there. But I'm amazed how far back Nebraskans will sit in when there's a lane closure. Like, really, you guys? Really? Okay, I'll cut past 100 people. And my wife's like, you are supposed to. And that's my new rationale to justify the guilt I feel. How about no pushing, tailgating? In fact, a lot of road rage, I think, triggers out of grade school rules. No pushing, that's tailgating. No cutting, no budging. I don't know what budging means, but that's what we called it in grade school. No cutting. And then people trigger and they become a grade school kid experiencing a bully phenomena while they're going 65 miles an hour on a highway. This is incredibly dangerous. And people lose their minds and lose their lives. And other people lose their lives as well. It's very dangerous. Okay. Now, I'm skipping over whole categories of peeves. I'll do a couple more. Grammar. Anybody? grammar rules. Yeah, my grandma was an English teacher. My dad was a grammar Nazi. Um, be home by 6. There was curfew rules. Be home by 6 was ours, but I've heard of be home by dark as a rule. Um, Here's my next question. How many of you carried this into the next generation? How many of you found yourself parenting out of these same rules, triggering on these same rules? Just a few. The rest of you are hiding. No. Yeah, so there's a reason why my father-in-law never got his daughter to turn off the light switches, and that's because she was not going to be controlled by him or by anybody, I've noticed. And I've noticed the few things I've spoken up for in the marriage all get worse. Um, that I've spoken up on it. She has an innate resistance to somebody usurping her authority. And it's not all wrong, but it's also not integrated or rational. But it's also not my hill to die on, so I don't say things like that. And hopefully she's not watching. I love you, honey. No, it isn't my hill to die. My policy with my wife is I am such a fixer-upper that if this is the flaws that she's carrying into the marriage, I'm just grateful. I just thank your lucky stars, Ian, because you brought in way worse. So I just try to humble myself and keep working on the planks in Mo and I, because hers truly are specs. There was another light switch one that I thought was really funny. It was a guy whose dad would press the num lock button to turn off the little dip light. Yeah, every time. Hey, when you're done with the computer, would you tap the num lock? Dad, this was his solution. Dad, here's a quarter. This will take care of the next 40 years of the electric bill for that little light. Okay, so let's not worry about the num lock light. But it's wild how irrational this gets. And like me yelling at a 2-year-old, okay, how irrational we can get when we trigger. A peeve is relatively simple. They don't get a lot of bandwidth in our life. They can be integrated often in just a few days. How do you know what your peeves are? Ask your children, ask your wife, ask your husband, ask your family, ask your black lab. They know. Yeah. Yes. And so when I tell the seminarians, like if you have a punctuality peeve, which is like the military's version of this, is if you're not early, you're late. And hurry up and wait is the other military one around time. And there's cultural reasons why there's differences here. Well, I'm not going to belabor it. Yes, it's another very common peeve, and Germans are the best at it, in my experience, culturally. Germans love punctuality. Germany is in near revolt right now because their train system doesn't run on time. They're having a lot of quality issues, track issues, engine issues, and worker issues. So what used to be the most reliable train system in the world, hands down, is now having issues, and the Germans are not doing well with this. Okay, the Mexicans are like, what are you worried about? There's another train mañana. That's my answer to the seminarians who get into this. I'm like, well, you can either do the integration or the bishop's going to give you Hispanic ministry. Either way, you'll be cured. And then I've heard that Nigerians make the Mexicans look like Germans, because Nigerians don't even use a clock at all. They don't track time by chronograph. They track time by event. And so I was talking to a deacon who is in a mostly Nigerian parish up in Omaha. He's like, oh my gosh, yes. It's incredible to try to host a wedding with Nigerians because they don't have the concept of the time we do. So the Mexican deacon's like, we just specify, are we talking Hispanic time or American time? That's how we specify. I thought this was a funny conversation. So peeves are simple, irrational scripts. That doesn't mean they can't be very destructive, okay? But they're usually very quickly integrated. Anxiety scripts, anger scripts, other defense mechanisms often take a week or two. And if it became a part of your personality or is a part of your personality, expect a good month out of it. I would say. What are you doing for that month? So we've got, how do I do healing? Try to do one memory a day. How do you do integration? You create a dialogue and you talk to the part repeatedly. The first example I know of was 3,000 years ago, King David doing integration work in Psalm 43, I believe. Actually, he wrote it in 2 Psalms. Why so downcast, O my soul? Put your hope in God. He's having a rational dialogue into a stuck feeling. And he wrote it in 2 Psalms, which means he was already repeating it and singing it. And he was rewiring himself by speaking the truth from his cortex into his emotional world. Why so downcast, O my soul? Put your hope in God. 3,000 years later, we're still singing that same song into our hearts. That's neuroscientists call this top-down integration, simply because the cortex is the front top of your head and the limbic system is the middle of your head. It's not very creative. So you're having a conversation from here to here. Okay? Head and heart is actually just about 3 inches, if that. With just a few repetitions, often a P will integrate. What does integration mean? It means I now have executive control. Executive control means I will be able to be aware, understand, and take action much, much more effectively. The next day I went to pick out the yogurt, I was far more in control of myself than I was the day before. And I'll give you the steps of a sample dialogue in a second. Question? Be aware, understand to some extent, take action. Executive control, did you study Latin, Father? What is the Latin phrase that repetition is the mother of all learning? Okay. I can't repeat that, so you don't get it. Repetition is the mother of all learning. Everything the brain learns, it does by repeating to get the cognitive wiring going. Okay, all fine motor control. If you took a typing class back in the day, you sat there tapping the letter A, and after 50 to 100 repetitions, you no longer had to think about the letter A again. You just willed the letter A, and your finger just did it. Okay, that's executive control. You don't have to think about it. You sat there wobbling on your training wheels. Now they ditch the training wheels, which is really smart. They just ditch the pedals altogether, because the art of riding a bike is actually just knowing how to do the balance point and how momentum helps you balance. So by getting rid of the training wheels as a crutch and the pedals that cause you to wobble, kids are learning to bike way faster. So yay science. Meanwhile, I'm crying at age 5 and it was a wound I had to heal. As my dad's like, you can ride a bike. I can't. The executive control, though, when you as kids figured out that balance point, you never had to think about riding a bike again, unless you were doing tricks and stuff like that. It just clicks. There comes this day, all of you who are moms, you were watching that kid learn to stand up, doing this even as an infant, and then stand by themselves on something, and then they start sidestepping around the coffee table, and they're practicing, rewiring their brain, okay? And then they take their first step, and it's like, boom, they never cruise again. They're just walking and running. It's crazy. Boom, executive control, they've got it figured out. Now again, if they're learning nuances, like when I learned to skip, I had to start practicing that till I could skip without any effort, or skid stopping on my bike to burn up the pavement or whatever we were doing. There's more learning involved, but everything you've ever learned, how to spell, how to hold a fork, how to write a word, how to type, you had to practice until you had executive control. And then you don't have to think about it. Driving, another great example. This is why teenagers are way worse drivers than adults. You don't think about driving, you just will your car down the street. And your body's doing all these things, hundreds of things a minute. Your body's doing, adjusting, braking, turning, changing the radio. You're not even thinking about driving. You're just willing your car down the street because you have full executive control of that. A teenager needs to think. Oh my gosh, someone pulled out. What do I do? Okay, brake. Okay? Someone pulls out in front of you guys, you just brake. You don't think about it. Just will your car to a stop and your body complies. Now, as our bodies break down, brains get less efficient, there can be slowdowns with all this stuff. And a stroke requires somebody to rewire their brain, and that's very hard for an older brain. So, but it's the same process. My wife is a physical therapist, and she's constantly rewiring people's brains. Okay, now move your leg while she moves their leg. And the brain figures out, oh, something's moving. That's what we did as infants. Okay, we whacked ourselves in the head enough times, and then we realized, wait, that's me. And then you see the infant staring at their hand, and they're amazed. It's like, I remember when my son found his hand on the top of his head, and he was amazed. What is that up there? Oh, he just would reach around. He had a big head, so it took him quite a while to grow into it. That was no easy thing. It took him a while to walk, too, because his center of balance was so off because of his huge melon. Okay, here are the steps if you want to do an integration exercise. And I have worksheets for this. And if you're a perfectionist, I have a whole talk I can give you if you ask for that. That has the neuroscience and some Ignatian repetition and stuff like that. So, but the basic steps are, if you are going to do deliberate integration like King David did 3,000 years ago at the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, start with greeting who you're talking to. Okay? David talked to his, oh my soul. Okay? If I were him, I would say, talk to downcast boy. Okay? Hi, downcast boy. That's how I would start King David's repetition. I'm sure the psalm is better than what I would come up with. So, salutation. If you struggle with perfectionism, dear perfectionism boy or girl, dear guilty boy, dear conflict avoider, dear comfort food eater, dear obsessor. Second, thank you. Thank you for trying to help me solve whatever they're trying to solve. Thank you for trying to help me be on time. Thank you for trying to help me keep the door of the fridge shut. Okay. Step 3 is optional. Acknowledge where you learned it. What's the origin? Okay. Thank you, refrigerator door boy. Thank you for trying to help me. Or dear refrigerator door boy, thank you for trying to help me keep the door shut. You learned this from dad when you were a toddler. Discuss the origins if you know them. If you don't, it doesn't matter. Skip it. Can you thank God for the defense? You could. I do believe the ability to create parts is a divine gift to help us survive childhood. But since we're doing top-down integration, trying to get these two parts of our brain wired together, I would actually leave God out of it, other than praying beforehand. Okay, because what I want to do is get my own soul wired together. God's a part of it because he's coming for the unity we're after. Woe to you of two minds. He wants to solve that problem for us. So, step 4 is what I call a grounding step. Introduce yourself to the part. They don't know you. They think you're still a child living a childish thing. I really did think I was going to get in trouble. My limbic system really thought I was going to get in trouble if I was too long in that refrigerator. I wasn't thinking about my dad, but I was thinking this is bad. So usually I would say something like this. I am now, say your age, say your name, say your title. I am now dad. I would skip the name, I suppose. I am a husband blessed with a beautiful wife and child. Incidentally, that was the child we just yelled at. Okay? I actually said that to my part while I was still sitting on the floor of the kitchen. And that's my fridge, and I pay the bills. These are all the things I said in the moment when I was taking care of business after yelling at my son. Thank you so much. You learned this from dad, but I'm the dad now. That was my kid we yelled at. And that's my fridge, and that's my money. I will take care of all of that. Dad's dead. Our dad is dead. No one's going to come in and yell. It's okay. I'll handle this. That was my actual integration conversation with my own soul once the light bulb went off. Okay, and I'm still sitting on the floor of the kitchen. um, and thank you for trying to help, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Those are the closing steps. Well, let me weave in 2 more steps. Step 5 is describe the old strategy. Okay, your old strategy is to obsessively close the refrigerator door as quickly as possible so we don't get in trouble. That's step 5. Describe the old strategy. Your old strategy is avoid conflict at all costs. Insert irrational strategy here. And then what's the new strategy? Okay, I'm the dad. That's my fridge. I'll pay the bills. I'll worry about condiments getting in a timely way. And then the closing step is I'm going to visit with you a couple times a day until I know you well and you know me well, until we have executive control. I'm going to keep doing this until I'm in charge of you. I don't say it that way, but that's the reality of it. Okay? And by the next day, I was in charge. I now actually like to stand in the refrigerator door with the door wide open and drink milk out of the milk carton, breaking 2 taboo rules of my family of origin at the same time, in the glory of the freedom of that cool air washing over me, in the radiance of that single dim bulb in the back of my fridge. And I do it on purpose. I do it to celebrate my freedom. I really do. It's my house. It's my milk. So, and I also, it's to remind myself, because, and this is important what I'll say next, just because I've integrated my refrigerator door boy and the other 22 on the bus with me through life, doesn't mean they're not there and can still trigger and can still try to help me. Okay. I am just in so much executive control typically that it's very difficult for them to do that. But I can still hear my refrigerator door boy act triggering on stuff. I can feel a little angst out of him when I watch the movie Rocky and he's breaking eggs into that thing and he's swilling the eggs down and the refrigerator door is open in the scene the whole time behind him. And I'm going crazy, like, shut that darn door, Rocky. Dad's going to come in and beat you up. I'll still notice it, but I can just dismiss it so easily now is the point. There's a lot of freedom when you have executive control, but the brain doesn't unlearn things. So these things are just atrophying. They're fading over time, and my true self is getting more and more competent to drive. My people pleaser came charging out a few years ago when I was giving a talk, and I didn't know what to do. When we don't know what to do, our parts are more vocal. Somebody had mentioned an example somewhere today, and I was going to say it, but it was out of context, and now I've lost it. But my people pleaser was like, "Oh, I know what we should do," and suggested something ridiculous to me. And then it was like nostalgic, like people pleaser. My gosh, hi. No, I think I'll just be my true self here. But thank you. And that was the end of the conversation. That was thought stopping. That was be aware, understand, and take action to reject. And then I just went up to the microphone and figured out how I was going to introduce myself without the pleaser's help. And it went fine. So these things can still trigger, but they don't trigger, they'll diminish, they'll atrophy as we learn better ways to run ourselves. When the brain figures out there's a much more mature adult way to handle this than my childish way of fight and flight, because that's the only 2 tools of a child. The limbic system can only do fight or flight. That's it. And freeze is a variation of flight. That's it. So once our adult brain figured out better ways to communicate, better ways to manage time, better ways to deal with money, better ways to whatever, we gravitate towards it. If you drove a route through Lincoln or whatever town you're from, you discovered, wow, Antelope Parkway, this new road here shaves 3 minutes off my drive. But gosh, I drove this other drive for 10 years. It's going to take me a while to learn the new drive, right? No. You're going to start driving the place that saves you 3 minutes because it's more efficient. You'd have to be pretty scattered to take the old route. We delight in efficiency. We delight in what is good, true, unitive, and beautiful. Okay? So, any questions about integration? If anybody Um, if anybody wants help forming a letter, okay, I don't have anybody next. 5 o'clock is when I start again. Oh, it is 5 o'clock. Nobody signed up for 5 o'clock. Okay. If anybody wants help, I'm happy to help. If you want to email like, hey, you said you had 150 of these things. Do you have one for this? I'll email you if I have it. If you want to spend a little time discussing it, I'll hang out here for 15 minutes before someone signed up. I'm happy to do that. And if you have questions, what's your homework assignment? Your homework assignment here, your meditation, in addition to doing more healing if you'd like to, is I would like you to try drafting a letter. If you have a part and you know the name of it, I'd like you to start the integration. Of the two places people get stuck, integration work is the much, much, much more problematic thing to take care of. A lot of noisy head traffic causing me to change my behaviors and mood on a dime, on a trigger, is much more problematic than the occasional wound getting triggered. They're both important. Integration work is more important. That's where most of our messiness comes from. And these parts complicate the healing, which is why I have been talking so much more about it. Okay, please. Didn't have someone for 5 o'clock. Oh, I took the picture earlier. Sorry, I didn't update my photo. All right. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. Saint Raphael, Saint Dymphna, Father and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.